in news and views on Salam Media. It is also the 25th of June, which means we are still in Youth Month. Now, Youth Day, celebrated annually on June the 16th, marks the brave actions of young people during the 1976 Soweto uprising. Their courage and sacrifices significantly contributed to the dismantling of apartheid and the establishment of a democratic South Africa. However, as we reflect on the past 30 years, it becomes painfully clear that the dreams and aspirations of those young heroes remain unfulfilled for many of our young people and citizens. The systematic inequalities and pervasive challenges that continue to plague our nation compel us to take a stand. So says the spokesperson of an organization called Cry of the Excluded. And to talk to us about it is Siyabulela Mama. A very good morning to you. Welcome to the program. Okay, it seems as if we have a slight technical issue. Perhaps we should take the news and then be joined by Siyabulela Mama, a spokesperson of Cry of the Excluded. Okay, it seems as if Siyabulela Mama's back on air. Very good morning to you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Julie. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Did you hear my introduction? And would you like to respond to it, please?
No, Julie, sorry if you can repeat. I lost
Okay,
connection there.
in a nutshell, I spoke about how the youth of the country are possibly being ignored and are very, very disgruntled because we do have a huge unemployment issue in the country, possibly sitting at 46%. And if something's not done and done soon, we're going to have some form of an uprising on our hands.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, there are also events to cite about this. One being the 2021 July unrest, where the poor was getting into shops to take food. And I mean, even last year, there's been situations in the Eastern Cape where I am, by the way, where you find at least two women dying of suicide and their kids as well, because of the crisis of hunger that we face in this country. With their in cases of, I mean, in towns like Nelson Mandela Bay, for example, about 108 children are being diagnosed of malnutrition and stunting, are being hospitalized for this, while at least 10 die of this crisis. So this is a situation that it's quite desperate, and it needs a serious, genuine intervention. I mean, even people do look for jobs. The youth does look for jobs, by the way. I mean, there's been a study by Youth Capital that at least the youth spend almost 3,000 just to look for work, 3,000 rands just to almost to look for work. So this is a crisis that it's unfolding in this country.
Okay, so let me. We do acknowledge that we have a huge unemployment issue in the country. Youth are at most risk. This is apart from the issues that you've raised. We also know that the high levels of crime and substance abuse in marginalized communities, of course, are symptoms of our broader social issues. These problems are often met with punitive measures rather than supportive interventions by government, and further marginalization of young people who need help the most. So, your organization, Cry of the Excluded, what are you asking government to do? How do you want them to intervene to fix this mammoth task of creating job opportunities, meaningful job opportunities for the youth, and get our youth mobilized in the right direction?
Look, Julie, I think you like touched this. The social fabric is seriously in a crisis of decline, and this requires, of course, serious interventions. And one of these interventions that we're saying, it's actually an end to neoliberal austerity. They stop budget cuts, and we don't know what will come with this GNU, and we suspect that this crisis will enhance. And also what we're calling for is to tax the rich, to fund a permanent basic income grant that is upper bound poverty line, because people are looking for jobs. There are no jobs. So what do you do in such a situation? Instead, we're seeing high levels of retrenchment continuing to rise. For example, now Mercedes-Benz is promising to retrench about 702 employees. So this is a serious crisis that this system faces. And we're saying then we need a serious intervention of a basic income grant through the taxing of the rich. Now, and of course, government needs, because another crisis that causes this is the crisis of deindustrialization. Okay, so how do we then a promise and enact a state-led reindustrialization, because the state has the capacity to do this, and these are issues and things that we actually calling for, and of course constitutionalizing the right to work. And once you constitutionalize the right to work, then it means government is now serious about the unemployment crisis that we're seeing in the country.
So you're talking about taxing the rich to then introduce an income grant pegged at about 1,500 rand per month. I'm kind of wondering, how do we go about in terms of, and I'm sure you will say that government needs to work out the proposals of how this is going to be implemented. But we also have to take into account that the taxable population is a very, very narrow band of people. It's going to be a huge task to tax that band of people even further to supplement the unemployed and the poorest of the poor. There has to be another way to do this, because that taxable band of people is in fact shrinking rather than growing.
So what we're talking about here, Julie, is an introduction of a progressive wealth tax. I mean, there's been research around this, that if you produce a progressive wealth tax of between 2 to 3% of the rich, you can raise about 350 billion. Okay,
Okay, you're
and this.
talking, sorry for the interruption, you're talking about the super rich. You're not talking necessarily about the middle class tax earners.
Yeah, yeah, and this is what actually we've been calling for. Like when we say the taxing of the rich and the introduction of a progressive wealth tax. And by the way, this with again the introduction of a corporate tax, right? Even if you look and in the 1940s around what corporate tax was then, and you look at in real terms today, what is corporate wealth tax? So in the 1940s, this would sit at about 40%. And now when you look at it, it's highly low. I mean, in real terms, you could see that companies and corporates are being taxed at about actually 10%. Okay,
True.
so we need to really look at a serious taxing of corporates. And there's also a problem, like organizations like the AIDC have done good research on this around profit shifting and illicit financial flows, and these monies that are leaving the country. I mean, there's now currently a court case between the union AMCU and Lonmin around how Lonmin is taking away through tax havens 45 billion outside the country. So, and imagine if this money could be redirected into the South African economy and what this would do. And these are questions that we're raising, and these are questions that we're raising around issues that could fund a social wage, a basic income grant in the crisis of unemployment. And government could also see what these do, by the way, to also introduce the basic income grant in which we talk about.
Okay, so that in closing, then, the basic income grant that you're talking about should be a temporary measure. You don't want people to always be wanting a handout. Eventually, it has to be phased out because job creation has to be topmost on the list. And in the moment the job starts becoming available for the youth and unemployed, then there should be the phasing out of the income grant, and that money should be further invested in more job creation. Is
Absolutely.
that how you want the
Absolutely.
model to look?
Absolutely. So because people are looking for work, Julie, but there's no
Mm,
work.
yeah.
I mean, people are spending money looking for work, but there's no work. At the same time, you face a serious crisis of hunger and malnutrition. What then do you do? I mean, even now, even the nature of work and how the nature of working closing looks like, you're lucky if you have a contract that lasts more than 3 months. Okay. So what then do you do? A basic income grant in that instance is an idea that we need and it needs to be implemented, while other measures for reindustrialization are being looked at.
Okay, very quickly, have you taken this issue up with government? It's a very, very serious matter. How seriously is your organization, Cry of the Excluded? How seriously is government taking you guys? How long are you in operation? And I presume you are going to fight till you get heard.
We officially launched in 2019, and ever since then we've been going and knocking in parliament, in occupying the office of the treasury, in handing over memorandums in parliament and different legislatures around the country, all over the country, saying this same thing. But this government is concentrated on this neoliberal austerity agenda, and until these gets into the right ears, we will stay on the streets. We will protest until our demands are heard and are met.
Siyabulela Mama, that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you indeed for your insights. You are the spokesperson of a Cry of the Excluded, and I hear you loud and clear. There is a huge issue as far as unemployment, youth unemployment is concerned, and that is resulting in very high crime rates in the country and a lot of young people turning to drug abuse. Be well, stay strong, and make your voice heard ever louder than before. Thank you for your time. Go well. It is 9:09 exactly on News and Views. And just a reminder that this hour of News and Views is sponsored by Africa Muslims Agency. Africa Muslims Agency, a beacon of hope to communities for over 35 years in Africa and beyond.